Scribbly Gum presents The Seaside Witch, Episode 12. I baked a chocolate cake, a coffee cake, some strawberry iced muffins and a vanilla slice. Then I took the dates out of the fridge, de-pitted them, and spread them on a piece of baking paper. I slathered that with some crunchy roasted peanut butter and then poured dark chocolate over the top and left it to set. I'd never failed to charm anyone with my date slice. I cringed every now and again as I replayed moments of the previous meeting in my mind. I'd been rather brisk with the coven the last time, and if I wanted their help, the least I could do was sweeten them up a bit first. The baking cleared something in my mind. Even if I hadn't invited them yet, I was confident that Annabelle would rally the women and everyone would show up to assist me, even if it was out of loyalty to Great Aunt Valerie rather than to me. And if they didn't come, I still had Selma and Penelope looking out for me and watching my back. I rummaged around the plate cupboard, trying to find the nicer dishes on which to display the various baked goods. I was aware that I was procrastinating, but, to be fair, it had been quite a day. It felt like another lifetime ago since Dad had been sitting across from me at the table, silently eating his dinner. But he'd only left this morning, right before that blasted skinwalker had waltzed right into my brain and frozen me to the footpath. It annoyed me no end that Penelope and the book had said I had somehow let it in. I had somehow let some otherworldly, malevolent creature take over my bodily functions, which apparently no witch had ever done before. Perhaps it was the proof I needed that I didn't actually have a magical bone in my body, that Great Aunt Valerie had made some sort of horrible miscalculation in inviting me here, in entrusting her beloved town to me. I stuck my face in the icing bowl and licked it clean as I sulked. It went everywhere, of course. Pink frosting on my nose, on my eyebrows, on my chin. My hands were a sticky mess, so I went to wash them off. I could have sworn there was a draft in the hallway as I headed to the bathroom. I started trying to wash off the sugar and in the end decided it was far more sensible to just have a shower and do the job properly. After I was dressed, with my hair brushed and looking somewhat respectable, I returned to the mess in the kitchen. I'd used just about every baking implement that Great Aunt Valerie possessed, and she had a lot. There was a huge stack of dishes taking up every available bit of bench space, so I filled the sink with hot soapy water and proceeded to do the washing up. It must have taken a good hour with another half an hour of drying, putting away and wiping everything down, but finally the kitchen looked like it could potentially host a coven of witches, or at least a group of women who fancied they were witches. I still wasn't quite sure what the distinction was between the two, but I was fairly certain I'd find out once the meeting was underway. But the question still hovered in my mind. How was I letting the skinwalker in? Something scratched at a corner of my brain, but when I turned my attention to it, it shied away again. I felt like somewhere, deep down, I already knew the answer to the question. I thought about Sunhee, growing that bloom in the palm of her hand, and my own embarrassing efforts to emulate her. She had said something about believing she could do it. I looked down at the palm of my hand. I really looked at it. Every groove and plane and wrinkle, and then I thought about a lilac. Not one that appeared there, but one that had always been there, just outside of my plane of vision. I gasped softly as pink light pooled on my palm, and then something delicate and purple was there, just as if it had always been there. The pink light faded, and I lifted the tiny bloom up to my face. It smelt fresh and sweet, as if it had just been plucked from the stem. It was brimming with life. It was real. It didn't fade with the magic. The lilac was real. It wasn't an illusion or my imagination. The flower was right there in my hand. And if the flower was real, then I had to be a witch. I could do magic. I could talk to a cat. Which made it even more humiliating that a damn skinwalker had moseyed on into my mind. But I hadn't known I was a witch then. Yes, multiple strange things had happened, and I'd met quite a few people claiming to be magical and spoken to a cat and a sentient broomstick. But all of that had felt rather like a bizarre dream, not real life. I reached down and pinched myself 3 times on each arm, just to be absolutely certain I wasn't dreaming right now. I didn't wake up, and the flower was still sitting in my hand, spilling its floral perfume into the warm air of the kitchen. I imagined another bloom sitting there, a simple daisy with light pink petals and a dusty yellow centre. Pink light pooled again, and there it was, right next to the lilac, a perfectly petaled pink daisy. It wasn't a trick. It was real. I tried a 3rd time, but nothing happened. Perhaps I'd used up my quota of magic for the day. Still, 2 flowers conjured out of nowhere was a pretty solid start to my career as a witch. Perhaps I'd even surprise the others when they arrived. I opened the fridge to check the milk. Even though it was a full carton, bought fresh by Dad this morning, I still twisted the lid off to smell it, and nearly threw up in my mouth. It smelled truly rotten, as if it had been left sitting out in the sun for days, not chilled in the fridge. I checked the date. It should have been good for another week. I poured a bit out in the sink, and it came out in dribbles and chunks, which was decidedly odd for fresh-bought milk. Still, I supposed it was just bad luck and happened sometimes. Putting the lid back on, I stowed it somewhere in the back of the fridge to deal with later. I'd just pop out to get some fresh milk, then I'd call Annabelle and get the coven meeting over and done with. I smiled as I grabbed my handbag and headed down the stairs to the store. Selma was hovering near the bottom of the stairs as if she wanted to tell me something. "Just got to grab some milk, then I'll get the witches here," I explained, not really giving her time to reply. I repeated the sentence loudly in my brain, hoping Penelope was still sleeping somewhere in the shop. And then, before I could chicken out and change my mind, I opened the door and stepped out onto the street. To be fair, I had taken some precautions and sprinkled myself with a mixture of rosemary water, which had steeped while I baked my various cakes and slices. I'd also dabbed quite a lot of eucalyptus oil onto one of Great Aunt Valerie's laced handkerchiefs and tucked it just below the collar of my t-shirt. There were 2 of the iron nails spiked through my bun, and my neck still groaned under the weight of the iron chain. If any skinwalker did get close enough to attack me, it was going to be met with a whole lot of its least favourite things. I smiled a grim smile as I scanned the street. There was just the usual bustle of people. Some tourists taking photos of the quaint shop fronts, a mother pushing a pram, a little old lady walking her dog. No one that stared at me or stalked towards me. Still, I kept a brisk pace as I headed to the shop. Not to the big grocery store, just to the little corner store run by the kindly Goodrum family. They always had the basics. I kept alert as I walked, waiting to feel the prickle on the back of my neck that would let me know I was in danger. Halfway to the shop, I began to feel a bit silly. The sun was out, birds were singing, children were laughing, and there was the distant sound of the surf. All of the events of the day seemed ridiculous in the bright light of day. almost as if I'd made them all up. It was just such an ordinary scene out there. Normal people doing normal things. No world-walking creatures, nothing occult or out of the ordinary. In fact, I was likely the most strange and possibly dangerous thing on the street right now. I smiled another grim little smile at the thought. Old Granny Goodrum was serving in the store. She was behind the counter, reading a Gardening Australia magazine, just as she always did. Her husband was humming somewhere at the back of the store as he restocked the shelves. I smiled and nodded at them both as I made my way to the milk fridge. I pulled out a carton of fresh cream milk, checked the date, and then tipped it upside down. It looked fresh and milky, so I carefully closed the door and headed to the counter. "Just that, my dear," said Granny Goodrum, ringing it up on the register. "Yes, thank you. I'll pay cash." I handed over the exact change and was back out on the street in a jiffy. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. As far as I could see, there wasn't a single nefarious thing in the whole of Rosewood Bay. Still, I didn't dawdle too much, although a particularly pretty dress did catch my eye and I stopped to admire it just for a moment. There were no uncomfortable neck prickles, no pale-eyed skinwalkers anywhere to be seen. Not even Matty, with his moody grey eyes, was out on the street to spoil anything. The birds were singing. A little girl was riding her bicycle down the street as her proud grandpa watched on. A ginger cat was sunning itself on a neighbour's fence. I'd almost reached the store when I remembered the brown, greasy stain right where the skinwalker had been standing, where Matty barreled around the corner. I knew I shouldn't linger, but I had to see it for myself. Looking both ways, as well as up and down, and peering into the shadows, I crossed the street. It was still there, a murky, iridescent puddle. The smell made my skin crawl. I'd once done an interview with a factory worker at a lanolin plant. The smell emanating from the smokestacks had made me want to retch. The puddle smelt like that, of fear, of death, of something evil. I stared at it for another moment or two and resisted the urge to take a sample. If the coven were interested, I could show them the smear. It seemed better not to touch it. Or I could always ask Matty about it. Not that he was exactly forthcoming on any topic, but he'd been there. He'd done something to the skinwalker, otherwise I'd have been caught, and who knows what would have become of me. As unlikely as it seemed, Matty had saved me. Then I remembered the two of them had been talking the day before the barbecue, across the street from the greengrocer's. So what exactly was the nature of their relationship then? Was Matty running around Rosewood Bay with skinwalkers? And if so, why? Turning from the puddle and feeling more puzzled than ever, I looked both ways and walked back across the street and opened the door of the shop. The shop was silent, but I could immediately feel that something was different. I hurried past the counter and to the stairs, my skin prickling as I moved further into the room. Penelope was standing at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide and her fur on end. She looked scared. Silently, I asked if she was okay. "While you were off prancing about town, we were attacked. Selma has the enemy backed into a corner, but we require your magic to send it packing from the store." My stomach dropped, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise as I dropped my bag and slowly walked up the stairs. I took a deep breath before I rounded the corner of the hall and stepped into the kitchen. Selma the sentient broomstick had pinned a terrifying creature against the door of the larder. The animal was huge. It had pink eyes, jagged yellow teeth, and I could smell its carrion breath from across the room. I recognized it from the picture in the book. A hellhound. I flinched. What should I do? Should I call animal control? Penelope turned on me with a look that could wither the sun. "Are you dull? Banish it, girl." The panic rose in my throat as I surveyed the creature. It was huge. It was a small horse. It could tear my throat out without so much as a second thought. Even Penelope was scared. I knew there wasn't much that could scare that cat. She looked so small standing there, flicking her tail. The beast would rip her to shreds, unless I stopped it. Something tingled in the palms of my hands. I looked down and saw pink light pooling there. My light. My magic. Unlike with the little flowers, this flow of magic had a warmth and a texture. It felt like power. More and more of it flowed out of me, and the beast in the corner leaned back, trying to get as far away from me as possible. "What do I do now?" I asked Penelope. I was in awe at the light pouring out of my body. It had no beginning and no end. It was me, and yet it wasn't. Within my magic there was no doubt or fear. There was only certainty. "Do you know a banishing spell?" Penelope asked, her eyes not leaving the hellhound for 1 second. This is a pretty new situation for me, so no, I don't know any banishing spells." "This creature needs to be sent back to the Shadow Realm," said Penelope. "Well, do you have GPS coordinates? Could you drop me a pin? I've never heard of the Shadow Realm. Where is it? Next suburb over? Give me something to work with here." "Selma can't hold it for much longer, so whatever you're going to do, witch, you'll have to do it soon." I glanced over at the sentient broomstick. It was glowing blue and thrummed with power. If the hellhound was somehow resisting that deep well of power, what chance would I have? My magic started fading from my hands, the bright pink blanching as my self-doubt marched through my mind. I looked at Penelope, her teeth bared, her hair on end, ready to fight. I looked at Selma, her blue magic crackling, a wall of bristles and wood between me and the beast. She wasn't in the shop now. This was not mere duty. This was something else entirely. Something shifted then. If I couldn't do it for me, then I had to do it for them. I had to do something to bring my magic back. I bit hard on the inside of my cheek. The pain helped me focus. I shoved my fear down to the very tips of my toes. Then I glanced back down at my hands. The pink light had stopped fading, but it wasn't coming back. I refused to give up. I racked my brain for another way. There had to be another way. I grabbed the rusted iron dagger and held it in my hand. If I couldn't get the light to stay, then I wasn't going down without a fight. Then a word popped into my mind. Not a magical word, but something that had worked for me in the past. Mantras. I would say them even if I didn't believe them. I would say them until I believed them. I was a witch. I was a witch. I was a witch. I was powerful. I was powerful. I was powerful. No one attacked my store. No one threatened Selma and Penelope. No one stalked the streets of my town without answering to me. The energy returned and glowed brighter and brighter until the room was bathed in pink light. It danced with Selma's blue magic and then drove towards the beast. Panic laced its demonic pink eyes as it flinched and tried to wriggle free. Then everything seemed to happen at once. Selma shifted suddenly to the side as the animal lunged and I threw my light at it. It leapt past me, dragging a long, jagged claw down the length of my arm, and then disappeared from my sight. Whether it had bolted down the stairs or somehow travelled to another dimension, I had no idea. All I could focus on was the pain in my arm. It was agony, the like of which I had never experienced before. I staggered to my knees, my head spinning. Wading through sludge, I pulled my phone from my pocket and managed to punch 4 letters into a text. Help. I hit send. The darkness was closing in. I closed my eyes drowning in pain as the world faded away. Oh, hello there, Scribbly Gum here. I just wanted to let anyone listening know that that is the season finale for season 1. So that will be the last episode for the next wee while. I've got to get back into writing season 2. But I do hope to have that written, edited, and recorded sometime in the next couple of months. If you've made it this far in the podcast, thank you so much for supporting the show, and I hope you've enjoyed the story. And if you ever have any questions, queries, comments, you can always send them to scribblygumstories@gmail.com. Until the next season, take care.